just connecting. All right, everyone's coming in. Welcome, everybody. So you can see these are all the people. Oh, look who's that, boys.
Nanny.
That's Nanny. That's right. Nanny has to watch your interviewing debut, hey?
Mm-hmm. See, look, it's CH like my first two letters.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Ben's Book Club. Just wait for everyone to come on in. Got a lot of people here. As you're coming in, if you want to, it'd be really cool if you could put just in the chat just where you're from, maybe your local library. Where in the world are you from? We've had people all the way from Germany one time. We had some people from Los Angeles tune in. Bathurst. Very cool. Welcome, Kath. Oh, look, Harvey Bay. Remember we went to Harvey Bay?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we went and saw the whales. Brisbane, yeah. Newcastle, Wollongong.
Yeah. Wait, I saw Nanny's.
Yep, that's from
Hi,
Yarram.
guys, we're from Yarram.
Yep.
Yarram.
Mount Evelyn, Adelaide. So as you all can see, I've got some special guest interviewers here with me.
Los Angeles again.
But we'll crack in as everyone's coming in. Oh, awesome. Ipswich, Wollongong, Toronto Lake, Mac, Sutherland Shire. Los Angeles, Tracy. Well done. Well done. Gippsland. Oh, very cool.
It says Los Angeles again.
Yeah, so that must have been the person from Los Angeles from last time. That's Tracy. That's really cool. Good to have regular people in.
Another person joined.
That's true, yeah. So let's get right to it. Let's introduce Craig. Craig Silvey, man who maybe doesn't need any introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway. Craig, one of Australia's favourite authors. Bestsellers under his belt include Jasper Jones and Honeybee. Jasper Jones became a very successful film, which was amazing as well. He has been twice named on the Best Young Australian Novelists by the Sydney Morning Herald and shortlisted for the International Dublin Literary Award. Jasper Jones was released in 2009, has sold over 400,000 copies, which is massive. And then Honeybee has been listed as the #1 book for the Better Reading Top 100 Books of 2022. Published in 2020, it has sold over 100,000 copies. And now Runt is what we're here to talk to Craig about today. Runt is his new book. So hopefully everyone's had a chance to have a read of Runt on the Libby app. And yeah, let's get into it. Craig, let's welcome Craig. Let's give a round of applause. Woo, Craig!
Oh, thank you, team. What a pleasure.
Yeah, it's so awesome to see you. Where are you hailing from? Where are you at the moment?
I am in South Fremantle, Western Australia. Yeah, so I'm back home.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, so let's get to it. We're going to have our first guest interviewers. So over here, we've got the young Henry Hobson. Say hi to everybody, Henry.
Hi, everybody.
Very cool. All right, you want to read your question out to Craig in the microphone?
Where did you get this idea from?
That's a great question. You know, it's a difficult question to answer where ideas come from. They just occur to you, I suppose. And just over the course of my meandering thoughts, a couple of people came into my imagination, and they happened to be Annie Shearer, who in that moment I didn't really know very well, but she seemed to me to be quite quiet and solitary and perceptive. And she was accompanied by her best friend, who was a dog called Runt. And I knew that they were best friends, and I knew that they had a very close bond. I knew that Runt would obey everything that she said. I knew that Runt was a really athletic and spry and agile dog. But the moment that I knew that I had a story to tell, the moment that I thought there might be a novel there, is when it occurred to me that Runt wouldn't move. He would freeze if anyone else was watching. It just had to be the two of them in their own private universe, you know, their own secret world. And I thought about, you know, what might be a really interesting predicament for the two of them to be in. And it occurred to me that if they were in a place where the world was watching them, but they needed to perform I thought that might be a really interesting sequence of events for Annie, who has a proclivity for fixing things. Would need to turn her attention to her best friend, and so that's kind of where the idea for the book came about, and then everything else swirled out of it. Where they live, her family, what the problems really are, all the other things that she needs to fix. So you start with something really small that feels like there's a lot behind it, feels like there's a lot of potential in it, and then you just spend time with them. Like you would when you meet any stranger. You ask them questions, you see how they might respond to certain things, and you just let their story come to you. That's why it takes a bit of time.
I think thank you, Craig. You say thank you to Craig?
Thank you.
A great question.
I think when we were reading it, it actually was, we were shouting at the book sometimes, weren't we? We're like, Runt, move. Because that problem that you described, like we really felt the tension of that as he was, all the eyes were on him. All right, Charlie, now time for Charlie. This is Charlie. All right, Charlie, you want to read your question out to Craig? You can speak into the microphone.
How did you come up with the idea of Runt, the character?
The character of Runt, I suppose, came to me when I realized that that Runt was a little bit like Annie in that he was a bit solitary and a bit misunderstood, I suppose. And that's what I love so much about their relationship, that they find each other, and it's their similarities that kind of bond them and bind them together. So Runt is a stray dog, and we don't quite know where he comes from. One day he just kind of emerges in ups and downs, and he needs to survive somehow. He doesn't receive a lot of support from the local people in town. In fact, he's a bit maligned. They don't understand him, and they're a bit annoyed and frustrated by the fact that he's stealing their vegetables and rifling through their bins and taking chicken schnitzels off the plate of the pub, and he's a bit naughty. And then he meets Annie, and Annie is the first person who shows him kindness and generosity. And in that moment, Runt feels as though he's found a home, he's found a person, and Annie feels the same way. And so despite the fact that they both have been quite solitary, lonesome characters, they find each other, and a great friendship is born.
Yeah, it can be pretty special when you find that like-minded person. Hey, that person who becomes your best mate. All right, boys. Well, let's say thank you to Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
Yeah.
Henry and Charlie, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for your questions. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you've got some good readers here, Craig. I think they're going to read the next one, that's for sure.
Oh, fantastic.
You boys want to go get some dinner now? Go have dinner with Mum? All right, thank you, my boys.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
All the people.
Enjoy dinner.
Nanny said hi.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Do you mind shutting the door, please? All right, thank you. Yeah, it's such a special book, Craig. We had such a joy reading it, and there were those moments where we did yell out at the book, which I think is actually quite difficult to do, to have that response. So when something amazing happened in the book, the boys would actually clap. They'd get,
oh my gosh!
Yeah, you've nailed it. It's such a special book, man. Thank you too for taking their questions so well. They were very excited. They've been talking about it for months since we started reading. Oh, we get to talk to Craig. I know they've been very excited. Can we talk very quickly? The last time I saw you, we had a bit of a chat about how you really think it's important to really craft the reading experience for readers. Because I was talking about what a magical book this is and how special it was. And you said you really labor over every aspect of the actual book, including the paper type, including the design and the binding and all those sorts, the font and all those things. Can you just unpack that a little? Because this is such a special read.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of making a book feel significant, so that when you're older, maybe like my boys, when they're older, they're going to remember this book because it was felt special. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I feel quite idolatry about books. You know, I grew up treasuring them, and I continue to treasure them. You know, they're beautiful things to hold, and you know, the case in point is this gorgeous hardback. You know, it feels nice in the hand. It's got lovely end papers. It's, you know, it's a beautiful hardback.
I feel
Illustrated.
a bit. Mine's the Arc, the
I
advanced.
know. We've got
I
to
feel
get
like I've
you.
got to buy a new one for Christmas or something.
We've got to get you
Yeah.
a hardback, and you know, these gorgeous illustrations by Sarah Acton just kind of bring this story to life. I think I, given my fascination for them, my love for books, I want to be involved with every aspect of its production. You know, I've always been intimately involved with the cover design. I'm interested in design. You know, you start to gather a kind of intuition for how the book might sit on the shelf and what it might look like, and so I've always prepared very detailed design briefs. Whilst working obviously in concert with my publisher. There are a lot of different departments that go into electing what a book's ultimately going to look like. You know, from the author's own sensibilities to trends, to sales departments, to marketing, to publicity, to your publishers. That, you know, it's a collaborative community effort. And everybody's, you know, got to ultimately be happy with it. And so it is a collaborative effort, but one I'm always interested in being a part of. One thing I'm particularly interested in, which is a little bit unusual, I suppose, is typesetting and font and how the story looks on the page. And I try to make sure that that I avoid walls of text. I like breathing space and room in the books that I read and the books that I write. And so I tend to design the text on the page the same way that I have a sensibility for cover design. If I have an opportunity to start a fresh paragraph, I'll take it. I typically have chains of dialogue intersected by a gesture or a preceding moment, which is always an opportunity to break things up.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I want to feel it breathe. I want to give it some air. And what that does...
Make it feel overwhelming for people. Make it feel light and airy. Yeah.
Right. Well, sometimes the opposite is useful too when you're managing the pacing of your text. And so if you want to slow things down, a big block of text can be useful, you know.
Yeah,
so, the opposite can be worthwhile. But typically, particularly for a book like Runt, I wanted a big, airy, not ornate, but like a classic font to carry this story, to give it that storybook feel. You know, I mean, this book is a bit of a love letter to the books that shaped me as a younger reader and the books that I adored growing up. And so the way that I hesitate to say packaged it, but I think the way that we've designed it has been with that timeless aesthetic.
Yeah, I pay that. Like, it felt like I was reading a classic, even with my different one. It felt the tone of the book is really captured by just every little design element. It was really funny. Like, it's never struck me. I don't know how many authors really labor over that stuff the way I think that you really care for that stuff. It kind of inspired me to really start to think about my own books in those terms, because I've always focused more on the content of the words, which I know you do as well, but that extra level of invitation to people to pick this book up and engage with it is just so important. So if you don't mind, I just want to say very quickly, I sort of, you know, because the boys are in here, I wanted to make mention, guys, this is Ben's book club. The main thing I love to do with this book club is actually get all of your questions to Craig. So if you have a question at all, if you've read Runt and enjoyed it over the last month, please in the chat write your questions for Craig, and then I'll read them out to him as we interview him. But if there's anything you want to comment on, I really encourage that kind of interaction, as it's one of the special things we can do, I think, as readers, is actually come together and unite over a book. And it's kind of cool that we're all from Western Australia all the way up to Queensland, all the way to Los Angeles. It's kind of cool. We all get to come here and talk about something we love. So yeah, if you've got any questions for Craig, I just encourage that to go into the chat. Can I talk just very quickly about the illustrations by Sarah Acton in this book? You just mentioned them very quickly just then. Just absolute, it felt like, I hope this is a positive comparison for you. It felt like Charlotte's Web when I was reading it. It felt timeless in that way, and just absolutely beautiful. And like, do you have any of her work framed anywhere? Like that would be a thing that I would be thinking about if I were in your shoes.
Yeah. Oh, what a lovely thing to say. Yeah, I appreciate that deeply. Charlotte's Web is one of my very favorite books. It was a book that I fell in love with very early on in my life, and I've gone back to. E.B. White is a hero of mine.
Oh, wow. Okay. I hit the nail on the head with that comparison.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, Elements of Style is as useful a book for any writer who has, aspirations to improve and develop.
Absolutely.
It's a brilliant book. And in fact, I think my favorite piece of writing of E.B. White's is actually the precursor to Charlotte's Web, which is an essay he wrote called "The Death of a Pig" for the Atlantic magazine.
I have no idea. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's tragic. He nurses a pig that is ailing. And yeah, it's coming to terms with his mortality and the end of its life. It's a deeply, deeply moving piece of writing and absolutely beautiful. And you can see that it was the seed from which Charlotte's Web emerged. It's a really, really gorgeous piece. It really is.
I have to look it up.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I do have one of Sarah's illustrations. It's the cover illustration, actually.
Oh, beautiful, man. That's so cool.
It was a really gorgeous gesture from my mother-in-law, who contacted Sarah and bought the original image and had it framed for my partner and I's daughter, who was just born 12 weeks ago. And so it's hanging.
That is so perfect, man. That's amazing. Yeah. What a thoughtful idea.
Yeah, it was gorgeous, really lovely. And Sarah is just the most talented, wondrous, generous people you'll meet. She's an incredible artist, and she brings this book to life.
Yeah, her illustrations are great. We actually did start reading it on the Libby app as well, because in my version, I don't know whether I can show everyone, I've actually got these big black boxes. See if I can, yeah, look. So the first time through, I didn't get all the illustrations, and it felt like I was like, oh no. So we went back through on the app, and all the illustrations look beautiful on the
great
ebook as well. Yeah.
You. Sorry, mate.
No, it's all right. Well, next time, Craig, we've got to pick up our game a bit, maybe. So we've got some great questions here already. Thank you, everyone, for typing, and people are really responding to this book, Craig. So I had a question here from Samantha. I think this is really a great question. What was your inspiration for the town of Ups and Downs? Where did you come up with this idea for Ups and Downs?
Samantha, that's a great question. I think Ups and Downs is perhaps a bit of an amalgam of the rural experiences that I had growing up. In fact, it was lovely to see so many people tuning in today who are in the regions. I saw Tamworth, we've got Bathurst, and everywhere in Australia. It's really lovely.
Yeah,
we have such a wonderful reading culture out in the country. People are passionate readers, and I'm very passionate about touring to those regions as well. I grew up in the country, so I'm keenly and intimately aware how that isolation can lead to social and cultural idiosyncrasy. We have a lot of characters out there in the country. We have really vibrant, wonderful communities. They certainly shaped me as a person. I wanted to celebrate that I suppose, in the town of ups and downs. I think, we see it a lot in the civic mindedness, the community spirit. We see it in the dry humor, that idiosyncratic voice, the wit, but also the extent to which our communities in regional places live at the whims of natural forces, and that undercurrent of insecurity, I suppose, that we're all beset by out there. It was something I wanted to explore, and I suppose contemporaneously, a lot of our regional towns are in a state of some decline and decay, and in need of an enlivening spark. And I suppose in Runt, I wanted to offer solution to that, and an opportunity to think about our regional towns in a different way. What gives the town of ups and downs its groove back? It's what re-invites this sense of optimism and hope.
That's really cool. I love that. It's how does that come to you though? Like, so you said before, in answer to the boys' questions, you had Runt and you had Annie and you had their partnership, and then you sort of just expanded out from that. Do you ever play with other ideas? Like, did you ever have Runt and Annie live in a big city, or did you ever have, you know what I mean? Like, do they live on the moon in a science fiction version or something like that? And then you settle, or does it just naturally occur to you that this is where these people would live?
I think you tend to leave yourself open for all possibilities, but you're, especially early on in a piece, you predicate your decisions largely by an intuition, an instinct, a faith in the story itself. And it was telling me that they were in the regions. It was telling me that it felt like it had some classic elements, and whether or not that was the story itself coming into its own focus, or whether or not it was informed by my soul and my history and and the books that I treasured when I was a kid, or whether it was a blend of both, I can never be sure. But it felt right that
It does. It feels completely right.
Yeah, it just felt like they should be in a country town that felt cohesive.
Yeah.
That felt whimsical. That felt a bit otherworldly, but also readily recognizable as a country town that you might drive to.
Yeah. I pay that. I think you nailed that tone.
Yeah, and what felt interesting to me was that its current circumstances, I suppose, all the boarded up shops, the fact that it was still living on this faded reputation, and it was in a state of decline and in need of an opportunity to invite change and to will adaptation, I suppose. I think it was an interesting notion for me to write about ups and downs in its current state. It was this really storied, historic, busy, successful community. But in years gone by, that's kind of faded a little bit, and it's just at that moment where it's going to go one way or the other, I suppose. So that was really interesting to me too, and it just felt right.
Yeah. It's just when you're speaking, it's making me, because I grew up in the country too. I'm from Yarram in Gippsland, Victoria. And recently in the last, like that, you're telling the story of our town where it really did, it was just all the people who had always lived there still live there, but there's no young blood and there's nothing, in bringing people there. But then we had this amazing chalk artist, and my mum's in the chat. She'll probably type it in, his name right over there. But he came and did these massive murals, which were so beautiful, these massive pieces of art. And lots of people flock now to come and look at all these massive murals on the walls in Yarram. It's amazing the power, I think, that art has to unite people. And yet it seems to be also one of the first things we get when we're desperate. It's also one of the first things we kind of let go of.
Yeah.
Which I
Yeah.
think is a bit of a shame. And it's obviously when you're fighting to survive, the last thing you're thinking about is art, but it is one of the ways that we invigorate ourselves, I think.
Totally. And it's one of those things that binds communities and makes a town more than a district on a map. You know, it builds culture and it brings us together, and it's vital. You know, it is the glue that really holds us together, and it attracts people too. You know, obviously industry and you know, all these other elements need to work cohesively. But you're absolutely right. It is a shame that often it's that cultural backbone which is the first to be discarded when it is actually, in those moments, actually the most important thing to retain. I think we learned that a little bit over the COVID isolation period, where we did actually turn to books. We turned to books and stories as a means of feeling less isolated and reconnecting with our sense of humanity, you know. And I think, you know, it might be partly why, I'm just speculating, but it might be partly why reading is so treasured out in the regions as well, you know.
That's well put, man. I appreciate that. I've got a great question here from Fiona, because you were just talking about this before. So Fiona says the Bathurst Book Club has read Honeybee, hasn't read Runt yet, so we'll try to avoid spoilers for you, Fiona. But it says here, my question is, what are your favourite old classics? Because Fiona was looking at Runt and thinking about Charlotte's Web as well, but you were talking about those books that really inspired you. What are some of those books?
Oh, as it relates to Runt, you know, it's lots of those stories from my childhood. Charlotte's Web was obviously one of those. I had a great affection for James Herriot and his All Creatures Great and Small series.
Of course, yeah.
But for some reason, I just really connected with those, and you know, I scoured secondhand bookstores to collect them all. And for some reason, I identified with the travails of a Yorkshire vet, you know, post-war. I don't know why, but I just loved them. You know, I adored Roald Dahl, from Danny, Champion of the World, to Matilda. You know, everything about Dahl was just infectious to me. I loved it.
There's a few people in the chat mentioning Roald Dahl. It seems to be a real point of comparison, I think, with this book.
Oh, I'm really pleased to hear that. Yeah. I mean, what I loved about Dahl was, I suppose, some of the cheekiness of his narrative voice, and you know, some of those wry judgments that bordered on cruelty, I think, sometimes. And what I loved about writing this book is the permission that it gave me, once I determined what the narrative voice was going to sound like, was the opportunity to get a bit persnickety and opinionated sometimes, and you know, inject that into the book. You know, other rural stories like The Loaded Dog by Henry Lawson, and I think I mentioned Paul Jennings. You know, all those books were really, really important to me. I think I favoured things that made me feel strongly, I suppose, whether they were tragedies or things that made me laugh, you know. One of the books that I remember the most, and I had no idea that at the time that it was a classic. I just pulled it off the shelf speculatively. It was a book called Goodnight, Mr. Tom by Michelle Megorian, and it's about a young boy from London who was billeted up north to stay with an old widower, and it's a deeply tragic, sad book in many respects, but it's you know, the beating heart of it is this relationship between you know, an old man and a boy who needs to be loved and cared for. It moved me a great deal, and it stayed with me for a long time. So you know, those stories, whether they made me cry or made me laugh, those are the ones that stayed with me the most.
Yeah, I understand that. And you do really remember those moments where a book can make you feel something. I used to read Goosebumps a lot because it would scare me.
Yes, yeah, those point horror books, you know, you get them at the Scholastic Book Fair, and you know, I love those too. I love things that made me laugh. I love Calvin and Hobbes and Mad Magazine, and you know, silly things, those Roland Harvey books, and you know, all the rhyming books and whatnot. You know, I devoured all of those. Yeah, loved it.
Yeah, really cool. Thank you for that answer. I really want to get to this question. I actually have to say, Craig, this is probably the most questions I've ever had from the chat here, which is really awesome. It just, I think, speaks to the quality of your material here. I've got a question here from Louise Monahan, though. I really want to read this one. So Louise is saying her 9-year-old, and I'm not sure whether the 9-year-old is still here to listen to the answer, but hello, 9-year-old. Why did you originally decide, Craig, to become a writer?
Well, that is a great question, Louise, and your 9-year-old. Appreciate that. You know, I was an obsessive and passionate reader from the moment that I could first decode letters, I suppose. It was something that I did really independently. It was an opportunity for me, who was a young boy who wasn't particularly brave or adventurous in real life, to go on journeys and meet new people and understand the world a little bit better. And the moment that I understood that I could tell my own lies and write my own stories and give other people the opportunity to go on those adventures that were of my divination, it was an infectious, thrilling realization, and it's never really ebbed for me. And so I just wrote when I was a kid. You know, I had a pretty lively imagination, and I'd read enough books to kind of intuit how to structure a story. And so I just did it because I loved it. I did it for the joy of it. And then it wasn't until I was in my mid-teens, I suppose, that I understood that it was a vocational aspiration that someone could have.
Yeah.
There was a writer who came to my school, and I'd never met or seen a writer before. And that had an enormous impact on me. And at that moment, I resolved, and I knew who I was and what I was going to do with my life. And I was 14 years old at that point. And that's what I did. I started writing a novel immediately as a 14-year-old. It took me a year. It wasn't very good. But I sent the manuscript along with a very passionate letter to that writer. His name's Glyn Parry, who came to my school. You know, he took me seriously, and he was very kind and very honest. And I suppose I felt that I'd had an opportunity to give it a real crack. And that's what I did. I started writing notes on my first novel, Rhubarb, when I was 16 in my last year of high school. I moved out of home once I'd finished high school, moved to Fremantle, where I currently live, and worked a lot of bad jobs to fund the time to write. And at the end of 3.5 years, I finished that manuscript, and it took me a little while, but I finally got it over the edge and got it published. And that's where my career really began.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you for your answer, Craig, and thank you to Louise's 9-year-old for asking that really cool question. We've got a couple of people in the chat talking about specifically the audiobook and how magical it was. I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but they're wondering about, Susan and Sally were both wondering about what sort of, I mean, we talked about your care with choosing all the different parts of the book. Do you have much of a talk about the audiobook and the person who narrates it and all that sort of stuff?
I'm so pleased that people have been enjoying the audiobook. Yes, typically what will happen is the production company will send through a fleet of auditionees, of potential narrators.
Yeah.
And typically they'll have a couple of favorites in there that they'll sort of guide you towards. But in this instance, I knew the best voice was going to be my dear friend, Genevieve Hegney, who is a bit of an actor's actor. She's just an enormously talented, brilliant voice artist, stage actor, screen actor, writer, producer, all of the above. And you know, I leveraged our friendship a little bit to get her involved. But
Why not?
Exactly. I just knew that she was right. She's just an extraordinary talent. She can bend and twist her voice into places that are unexpected. She's got a wonderful sense of humor. She's very warm. She just suited this story, and I'm so pleased that that she could get involved. So yes, the narration in this instance was at the invitation of me to a friend, Genevieve, and I'm so glad she came on board.
Yeah, a few people are citing the sorry, I'll scroll back up. Talking about the voice of Dad especially was really wonderful. Apparently, did you know this, Craig, that Libby app also has Goodnight Mr. Tom on audiobook, if you're interested.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, well,
Yeah.
I'll have to check in. I read it again recently, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing an event for the Perth Festival, I think last year, and it was all about the books that sort of shaped you as an early reader. And obviously Goodnight Mr. Tom was one of them. And, you know, I suppose I was a bit alarmed by a lot of the adult material that went over my head as a younger reader.
That's funny.
But I mean, it was no less devastating. You know, I found myself weeping as I read it, as well as another of the stories that was quite tragic that shaped me a lot as a reader back then. It was the first story that ever made me cry, and it was actually by Paul Jennings. It's a little story called The Busker, and it's in his Unbelievable collection. I might even have it nearby. And, you know, I tried to read that at this festival event, and I just couldn't make it through. It was just too devastating, you know.
It's such a beautiful story. I could ask Charlie, because I remember Charlie read that one. He was also in tears at the end of that one. It's so beautiful.
Oh, really, really gorgeous. And you know, I think it's important for not that Runt traverses, you know, any of this territory really. I think it's a moving book, but you know, there are no dogs harmed in the in the pages of this one. It's an uproariously heartwarming, lovely book. But you know, I think the opportunity to have a curated, guided journey through tragic instances is a really important thing for younger readers to experience.
Yeah, I agree.
And those books have stayed with me for a long time and have been very, very impactful.
Yeah, I feel like when you connect with a book and it makes you have that emotional response, especially as a young boy, like it almost gives you a type of permission to have a feeling and to understand that it's okay to feel this way. Whereas, feeling it in other ways can sometimes have this sense of shame attached to it, these emotional qualities, I think. That's where I think, a book is kind of this personal thing, right? It's this personal thing. It's really special. We've got a couple of questions here too. There's a few people saying Andy Griffiths and Terry Denton visited Gibson. Really? Oh, my children will be sad about missing out on that one. Lots of love for the audiobook. I really think you've nailed it on that one, mate. And was it Genevieve who read it?
Genevieve,
that's amazing.
Yeah, I'll pass that on. Thank you very much, everybody.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to chat with you about the distinction between young adult and children's fiction, and then adult fiction and literature versus genre. We've got all these labels for all these different things, and sometimes they can be useful, but sometimes they can be a bit restrictive, I think. I was wondering what your thoughts were on those sorts of labels. You know, did you have in mind, like, I wanted to write a book aimed at younger readers, or is this the story? Like, how does it fall in your mind?
Yeah, those labels don't really occur to me until it's a book, and then it tends to be the dominion of librarians, booksellers, sales departments, publicity. You know, in the moment when you're writing it, all I care about is the story itself and the characters who inhabit it.
Yeah.
I mentioned that intuition that guides you. Of course, you have an awareness of what kind of reader might be most attracted to the story, or who might identify the most with it, or how it wants to be written. I suppose you get an intuitive sense for that, and so very early on, I knew that it was a story that was probably best digestible by probably middle grade readers, people the same age and as Annie.
Yeah.
Which is why she's centered in the book, and so it would be prudent to invite those readers in. But with that said, I didn't tailor the book to exclude anybody either. In fact, I took great care to provide points of entry for all readers, I suppose. And I did that through the subplots and the desires and the aspirations and the travails of the entire cast of characters. And when I say I took great care, it wasn't a cynical exercise. It was simply the fact that these characters spoke to me.
Yeah.
And they demanded space in the story. And so I wanted to give them an opportunity to flourish and to come to life on their own terms.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily anticipate that younger readers will connect with Brian, who is Annie's father, with Brian's sense of duty or the pressures that he's under, or his approach to parenting necessarily.
Yeah.
I think younger readers will connect with him in his role as a parent, but I think older readers will take a lot from his journey and where he's at in life, and how he approaches his passions and his family, and the pressures that he's under. Likewise with Dolly, and his grandma, who is widowed and is looking for love, and sees herself very much as a sort of matriarch of this family. I wanted her to shine in this book and to not just be a character whose only purpose was to drive the central plot. She's a vibrant, respectable, interesting, fascinating character in her own right, and so the opportunity to coordinate her arc within the template of the story, whilst also keeping it palatable and interesting for younger readers, was part of the challenge, but was a big element that I felt was important as I crafted this book.
Yeah, I can totally see that, man. Can you talk very quickly too, because you were just sort of talking about it, but I don't know whether, to me, the children's book aspect of it, it just sort of it makes, I think that sometimes adult stories can be very complex and complicated to the point of being almost unknowable, especially as to what you're supposed to take out of them a little bit. But with Runt, it seems, and you can talk about this, but the main theme, and nearly every character gets this little moment, the main theme seems to be all about accepting and being proud of who you are. Would you say that's something that was in the back of your mind as you wrote it? Like, was that something where you wanted all your characters to have those little moments to encounter that as a theme, or is theme something that just sort of happens intuitively for you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the latter, and I suspect that there's a little bit of connective tissue, I suppose, between Honeybee and Runt. Yeah. Obviously, they're very different books, but Honeybee celebrates living your truth, and supporting people to the extent that they have the opportunity to do that and the importance of that. And Runt's quite similar in that respect. Annie is a different kid. She moves at her own frequency, but she's never insecure about that and never feels a moment of shame for it. She's very perceptive, very sensitive, very plugged in, interesting kid. She's very kind and she's very generous. And she gives the people in her life the permission to also be themselves. You know, Brian has his hidden passions. Dolly has her hidden interests. Susie, has her own passions as well, as does Max. And I suppose she just inspires the people around her to delve within themselves and to celebrate their skills and interests and passions, and employ those also to be part of a team effort. And so that was I think an interesting kind of thematic terrain. And I wanted to celebrate that. I didn't want a lot of friction within the Shearer family because it didn't seem as though their family unit really required it. They all have their own woes and worries, but they are very supportive of each other, very loving. And I wanted that to be a driving force behind the book. The momentum of this book is not ignited by conflict within that family. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the love and support that they give each other, which makes this book hum and brings it to life, I think.
Yeah. It's a strange thing though too, man, because I was thinking about that and it's just like, it seems so simple, but I don't know how many books I read nowadays that have that theme of a love in a family, of people backing each other. And even Max, who gets into all those hijinks where he jumps off buildings and films himself, and like the whole family gathers around him and helps him heal from those things. And you're not jumping off that thing again, but like it's not like a sense of shame they place on him. It's this loving kind of protection, I guess. I don't know. It was really lovely to read a book that had a very kind-hearted family at its center, I think.
Yeah, I'm so pleased to hear you say that. And I suppose the nucleus of that as well, the most important relationship of the book is between Annie and her dad. And I wanted to, maybe there's something aspirational about writing Brian, even though at that moment the notion of being a father was less than a twinkle in my eye. But I really wanted to give all readers, I suppose, an opportunity to see this really healthy, lovely, modern relationship between a girl and her dad.
It's nice.
I really love their journey together.
Yeah, it's lovely. I reckon this book will be one of those amazing books a lot of people buy for Christmas presents for their nieces or their nephews or their grandchildren. It's one of those brilliant little pieces, I think, that says a lot of love in the gift of it, I think. I've got a couple of questions up here. I love this one from Karen. Curcio. I'm not sure I'm saying your last name correctly, but you've been on the book tour for Runt. Have you been told any other incredible real-life dog stories from people while you've been on tour? It's a good question, right? I like that one.
Yeah, look, not too many. One of my favorites is in ABC Radio in the Southwest over here, had a competition for people to call in and volunteer their pet's great skill. And the person who won was an 8-year-old girl. I can't quite remember her name, but she said that her dog Wombat, his special skill was running away. So that was a good one.
Amazing name for that particular dog, I think, too. Wombat the dog.
Wombat is a great name. You can just imagine Wombat. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've actually had the great benefit of meeting a lot of people who have been involved in the canine agility course community and who are competing, and we've had dogs who have competed. It seems a really lovely tight-knit, wonderful community. In fact, they're having the national championships in Perth this next year. So I'm looking forward to attending that. That'll be a lot of fun. Look, people just have such affection for their dogs and their pets. And, hearing about those has been really lovely. It's been nice, in signing queues, meeting kids who very much want a dog. I'm going to use Runt as leverage to try and introduce one into the house. So that's been fun too.
Yeah, I bet you spend a lot of time helping those kids manipulate their parents, mate. I bet you do. Had a question here from Jeanette Beckler. I think this is a good one too. And this is going back to sort of your process with writing.
Yeah.
And this is going back to the structure of the book. How much do you plan? Do you plan everything out? Do you have all the cards up on the wall and have all the emotional beats, or do you just go with your gut? This is where this story's going.
Yeah, I tend to let a story come to me, I suppose. I explore a story, and I go on the journey. I hesitate to say it's similar to reading a book and having it reveal itself to you, because it's never quite that linear. A lot of writing is about decoding a story and trying to sort of recognize what characters and moments are trying to tell you and where it's going, and trusting in that. And so it's never quite as easy as, a story just tells you what the next chapter is going to be and where it's going to be. A lot of the craftsmanship and the artistry of being a writer is interpreting, I suppose, what some of these images or some of these vague ideas are telling you. In the same way that maybe, a musician needs to have a facility with an instrument in order to bring a song to life or a piece of music, a writer needs to have this, facility with structure and knowledge of how a novel needs to be formed and language and all these elements, which is how you bring something ultimately to life. But to answer your question, no, I don't typically plan a story out rigidly before I write it. It will begin with as I mentioned to Henry, with a small thought that feels big. It's something that feels laden with potential. And then you just spend time with it. You try to nibble around the edges of it and peck at it and tease out little threads and give it the opportunity to sort of come to you. And over time, you'll get a gathering sense of whether or not, these characters are living and breathing, and whether or not their story is one that might have merit and meaning, and might feel urgent to you. And this one certainly did. When it really feels right is when you feel like you've been given something profound and you feel like you're bottling lightning. Yeah. And so from that point on, you tend to just want to spend time with them, and you'll get a sense for what makes a story kind of proprietary, what feels different and interesting and urgent about it. And once you've captured that, then you start to go on the journey with it. And so you'll start writing some notes. You'll get a sense of, you'll have a few aborted attempts, I suppose, at how it wants to be written, like how it wants to be structured, what the voice is going to sound like. Yeah. And you'll fail a lot.
Absolutely true.
You'll test things out. It won't feel right on the page. You'll go back to square one. You'll try and work it out, and then you'll know it when you write it, how where it wants to be, how it wants to be. And once you have those elements that feel a bit concrete, that's when I'll embark on the story and I'll start writing it. And so I understand I'm answering this question in probably a very frustrating and nonsensical way, but
this is how you write as well. Like this question answer in of itself is sort of a metaphor for your writing. I like it.
Totally. I suppose you feel before you start writing the novel itself, you require a certain amount of ingredients that satisfy some of your doubts or insecurities. And they might be who these characters are and why they are, where the story might be headed, what what the predicament, what the central problem is, what the desires of the characters might be, where they live, how it wants to be written. These sorts of elements, you've got an intuitive sense of what that might be. But you can't know too much about it because you're not yet qualified. The only way you can really fundamentally understand a character and what their journey is going to be is to go on it with them. And to write the story. You can't preordain these things. You can't determine them before you've written it. And so you start with enough gas in the tank to get going. And then you just hope that there's enough material to keep sustaining itself as you go. But when I start writing a book, I haven't necessarily determined how it's going to end, where it's going to go, sometimes what characters I'm going to meet along the way and what their role might be. A lot of it is about discovery and revelation, which is what makes it thrilling. It would be pretty boring otherwise.
That's good. Yeah. Well, thank you for that question, and thank you, Craig, for that answer. We've only got time for a couple more questions. I can't believe this is almost at the end. I thought just a quick question. Favorite Australian novels that you've been reading in the last couple of years? Any authors that you want to shout out that people should be looking out for?
I'm a big fan of Robbie Arnott. He's doing wonderful work. Rhett Davis wrote a book called Hovering. Let's not forget Ben Hobson. My goodness, he's got a Western coming out. All
right, you can collect your paycheck later, mate. Thank you.
I'm actually I'm reading this book right now by Heather Rose.
Oh, I've heard that's awesome.
It is just gorgeous. I'm halfway through it. She's incomparable. She's such a star. She's so brilliant. I'd urge anyone to pick it up. If you haven't read, if you're not familiar with Heather's other books, Bruni is a masterstroke. All her books are just fabulous. Yeah. And a memoir that came out this year by Danielle Laidley called "Don't Look Away," I think is really beautiful. A Bogan Rhapsody by Cadence Bell. Give that a shot as well. Look, there are too many to name.
It is. We actually do have an embarrassing amount of wonderful writers in this country, man. So appreciate the shout outs for all of them. We'll sort of have to finish up there. I've got one last question, and we were sort of talking about this before we went to air. Elise here is asking this. Are you able to give any clues as to what is next? What are you working on? Any more books in this same age range? And can I add any news on film adaptations that you can share possibly?
Right. Well, next for me, I'm going to continue touring Runt, so there'll be a lot of next year. But early on, I'll be developing Honeybee for screen as a 6-part series. So our writer's room will assemble and we'll get to work there. That's
so cool. It's like non-isolating writing time, which is a bit strange, I bet.
Yes. No, I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And it'll be a great challenge. We're a fair way advanced with the Runt. I hesitate to call it adaptation because I actually wrote the two in concert. So I wrote the screenplay for Runt largely at the same time that I was working on the manuscript. So we find ourselves a little further advanced than ordinarily we might be. We've got a wonderful producer, fantastic director, a brilliant distributor. They're called Studio Canal. They did the Paddington films. So
I was going to say they're massive.
Yeah, they're really, really great. All is looking very promising to head into production next year. So cameras will start rolling. Other than that, in terms of what I'll be working on in fiction next, I think I'll be working on a Western set in Western Australia.
Nice.
I'm really excited about.
Yeah, but in terms of that one for sure.
In terms of writing for younger readers, if the idea strikes me, absolutely, I'd love to. I've really enjoyed. I think Runt has been the most enjoyable book that I've written. I really adored working on it. It was a lot of fun. It was very comforting. It was very heartwarming. It was very inspiring. And I've loved talking with people about it too. I've really enjoyed touring this one, really enjoyed visiting schools and chatting with younger people about reading and books.
That's really cool.
So yeah, it won't be the last book for younger readers, that's for sure.
That's so cool. Well, and you know, lots of people in the chat. Thank you, Craig, so much for your time this evening. Susan saying both my 10-year-old and 12-year-old are reading right now. Chris is saying thank you to Craig and Ben for an entertaining, informative. Thank you for inspiring young people to read. And Susan's also adding her thoughts there too, which are, yeah, just thank you, Craig. It's been such a pleasure as always to talk with you. Just to end off, guys, just a couple of little housekeeping things here and there. If you want to say, you know, if you want to put your clapping emojis in the chat or whatever you want to do, so thank you for Craig. So next, Ben's Book Club is a little different. If you're interested in keeping up to date with Ben's Book Club, if you just go onto Facebook and type in Ben's Book Club or Ben Hobson author, you'll find our group, but we have a lot of chats in there about books and writing and, have questions for the authors that we interview a bit beforehand as well. But next, there's lots of applause emojis. Oh my gosh. It's actually hard to keep up with you guys. You're so vibrant. The next Ben's Book Club, this is going to be a different one. It's going to be a joint effort with Maya Linnell. We're going to be talking to Maya. I'm going to be reading this book, but it's going to be a little earlier in the month. So it's actually, let me scroll down. I want to get this date right for everyone. You're very welcome to attend as well, Craig, if you want.
Oh, looking forward to it.
I don't have the date handy. Oh, no. Here we go. So it's going to be on Wednesday, December 14th. So it's going to be a little earlier in the month just to make way for Christmas and things like that. Everyone's getting busy with Christmas. So bookmark December 14th, which is a Wednesday. And we're going to be interviewing Maya, but we're also going to be talking to a podcast. We're going to be talking to a florist. We're going to talk to a librarian. It's going to be Christmas with Ben and Maya. It's going to be a wonderful way to finish off the year. So I'm looking forward to that. But without any further oh man, sorry, Craig. There's just lots of people here talking about how much they've loved your books. Thanks, Craig, from Sylvia. Thanks from Jane. Trish is saying thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I'm so grateful. Really appreciate it.
And we are all, I think, very excited to see anything you put to screen or pen to paper, or whatever you do next, man. So yeah, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for being a part of Ben's Book Club tonight.
Hey, Craig.
All right. Thanks for that, Malcolm.
Thanks, mate. That was fantastic. I think that was the best one of the year. My bloody screen's terrible here, so I'm not sure what's going on there. And Ben's buggered off, so he's having a good night. So
he's going to have dinner with the boys. I think he doesn't want to.
I would say so.
Yeah.
So this goes out on various platforms tomorrow, and is shared by all sorts of people, and they can still hear us. Good.
Oh, right.
Thanks, Karen. I hope you all enjoy the Libby app to borrow the book and get it from your local library or buy it from your local bookshop. So I'll end it now. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks, Malcolm. Cheers, mate.
See ya.